Alright guys, what's up? I know I haven't made a video in a long time, but I just kind of wanted to start making content again, so this is going to be the first video in a couple, and like a series type thing. I'm kind of not sure too much on the format. This is probably going to get cut up just for brevity and clarity and stuff like that, but this is kind of going to be for the newer IGLs who don't really have as much of an idea as what to do, how to set up their players, what different calls are, or just generally like players who are newer to teams and just teaming in general. So this is really meant more for them, kind of to get them comfortable with different types of calling and in-game leadership and stuff like that. So it's going to be kind of based around different aspects of different callers. So for reference, I'm kind of talking about different aspects such as like play style, what strats you can call, like whether they be fast exits, picks, or any kind of thing like that. So generally, I wanted to get started from the perspective of an IGL, just kind of explaining what certain things are, what their objective is, and just kind of general notes. I have a thing next to me that I pretty much wrote out, a couple hundred words, so I'm just gonna try to get through that. Touch on certain things that I feel like are more important. I'll skip over some things that I feel like less important. If you guys ever have any questions, you can always just leave a comment down below, or you can add me on Twitter, which should also be in the description. But for starters, I kind of just want to talk about general ideas of a map. So when you first start out, I'm not going to talk about piss around so much because that's more specific to your team, but generally when you're first starting out and you're calling when you have your full buy, kind of like what I would have in my inventory now, so Molly, Smoke, Flash, AK. Generally, what most teams start by doing is just calling a default just to figure out how they want to approach this team, because obviously you can watch demos and stuff, but you want to know what they're doing this game specifically. So generally what a default looks like is, yeah, the objective is to spread out towards like different areas of the map, just work different areas. So for example, I know that on multiple teams that I've played on, I would always be the apps player on Inferno, so I would come up, I'd just kind of sit here, make sure that no one pushed spoiler. My objective would be to kind of get control of apps. So to walk you through that small aspect, that's generally like put them all here, make sure that they can't peek, come to the stairs or jump up in the room to watch boiler, and come here, work for information, maybe peek this, get that information. But I'm not really trying to force a gunfight, I'm just getting control of the area. But there are different things that you could do on a default. For example, like it's obviously dependent on your team highly, and that's a huge point that I want to emphasize. But some teams work on getting map control, some teams work on getting picks early, and other teams just kind of try to get their players set up. I know that a lot of teams, especially on Inferno, like getting their opera close here, and they like getting like 3 or 4 players. They're gonna smoke off one side, they're gonna flash him in, and he's gonna work for this pick. That's like a lot of their game for some of them. And you know what? That's perfectly fine because it's fitting to them. So that's kind of one thing of that. So for what a common default looks like, at least on this map, just because I kind of like giving you guys examples, the most common one that I see is normally you have 2 players going toward apartments. One's going to come up in the boiler, up here in this balcony room to watch the boiler push. The other player is going to come up the stairs to clear the hall, or like wait here, and just get this area of control pretty much cleanly. You're going to have an opera back here watching for the cross. A lot of the time the mid is smoked, so they don't really have to worry about much. And then you're also going to have 2 players towards banana getting control up towards car area, and obviously they're going to molly this, they're going to throw nades here to get it, but you kind of get the point. They're working to get map control, get information. Their objective isn't really to get a kill, but if it happens, it's great. And yeah, so that's kind of what an Inferno default looks like. Obviously, it's gonna change based on your team and their like strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. But just a small example so you guys can understand a little bit better. Just kind of a little side note here, just to kind of explain something. The reason that you're defaulting is pretty much to lead to you getting the most advantageous call from your IGL. He's going to try to walk you into the best situation possible in the best form and method possible. So you getting that information that they're low on utility via that molly, that's going to be huge if you're going to walk out on an A site, because they can't stop you if you're going fast. You know what I mean? So that's kind of vital information that you need to gather early on in the game. One thing that I do want to note about these more default type rounds is that they're not really based in trying to work picks. You're, for the most part, gathering information. If you get a pick, obviously it's very good, but it shouldn't be the main focus of the round at this point. So for example, if this guy comes here and you swing and you get the kill, that's great, but you're still defaulting, so the objective should still be kind of, okay, I got the kill, let me still hold apps, see what they're doing in terms of nades. Like maybe if they get this kill, you're going to notice that this molly is going to come down here and they're not going to let you peek out. Okay, well, you should also keep that in mind. Maybe if they flash mid to try to peek your opera, maybe get a trade kill or something, you're still defaulting, trying to stay safe, because at this point, you're just trying to get yourself an advantage, like in the form of information. So that's kind of the biggest thing. Now, in terms of actual strats and having like more specific versions, I do think that that's going to be a lot more dependent on your team as a whole. Whether you have aggressive players, super like aim-based players, you have a couple more passive players who are supportive and stuff like that. But the main objective is to understand like what you're trying to get in the round. That's kind of the thing I'm trying to make clear in this video or in this example, is that just in general, you want to all be on the same page. That's honestly one of the biggest things that teams don't get right. You want to be on the same page of what you're trying to do. So always, if I'm IGLing for a team, I'm trying to like break it down, and this is the different variations that I break it down into. So for starters, I kind of have the default. Obviously, you're just working information. I already talked about it before. Your goal is just to kind of get map control, maybe get them to burn utility. If you get a pick, it works, but you shouldn't be forcing duels at this point, unless that is specifically part of your default and pre-planned. Um, Other than that, there are a couple different strats that are just styles of calling that are separated based on tempo and objective. So defaults are kind of their own thing because their objective is different from a lot of the other ones. The objective isn't to get control of a site or get a pick or do this or that. It's just to get information, set yourself up for the round, maybe get apps control so you can actually work out A and pop from halls or something like that. So that's one of them. The other ones that I have set up are also like different styles of exec. So you can have a fast exec, which I don't know if I can find the clip of Mouse Sports doing it, but they have this very fast execute that's normally meant to catch people off guard. Dust 2 is probably a better map to show up, but I believe that there was a fast execute where a lot of these players just came swinging up mid. They threw the A smokes, like there was a smoke moto, there was a smoke arch, couple flashes over the site, one over porch and stuff, and it wasn't very heavy on utility. They didn't have the worst utility, obviously, but they definitely did this fast. And the goal of these kind of calls are just to catch players off guard. So if you're doing this and it's like a minute 40, this player porch or this player arch, depending on what you're fighting, obviously, isn't going to be well prepared to take this fight because mentally they're like, okay, well, if this team's been playing kind of slow, they're not really gonna peek here, so they're just getting here or they're like getting set up, and then you swing around the corner with a flash and like your teammate smoked off. You can't really do much. You can't swap to an aid and fall back, and like you get hit with a flash. You're here. You don't really know what's going on. The odds are you're dead, and the rest of this lane area is opened up if your player balcony also gets caught off. So fast exec kind of takes advantage of players being out of position or not ready to take a gunfight so early, which can be good, but it's also really uncommon to do because it's kind of risky at times. So what I mean by that is in terms of risk and reward, the risk of doing this is that you're also just kind of banking on the player not coming here with an op or a Krieg or whatever and just and like peeking or peeking swinging out mid and seeing you guys, because if he does that while you're running out with smokes and stuff and doing this quickly, this is also a thing with Dust 2. If that cat smoke doesn't land fast enough and you're doing a fast cat split, there's a high risk that your players on catwalk are going to die. Same thing here on Inferno applies. If you swing out here and with a flash from your teammate who's supporting you, there's a high risk that one of your players are going to die, and that execute isn't going to be as fast, and it's not going to work out because they already got the advantage. They know what's happening. This guy's going to molly this, so you can't run up. He's going to fall back. There's going to be a rotation from B, yada yada yada. Obviously, rounds can play out differently, but that's for you guys to get the gist. So fast execs aren't normally called that often. I would say less than or about 5 times in a T half. Generally, I do them, me personally, when we're kind of meh on utility because you don't really have the time to throw that much utility, so it kind of fits well. Or if you have some weaker weapons, which like are a Galil or something, just to catch them off guard, because if they're caught off guard, it doesn't really matter what gun you have as long as you hit your shots. So it kind of takes that disadvantage of having that like Galil or Mac 10 away, and it kind of equalizes the playing field a little bit. The biggest thing that I would say that these kind of calls depend on are what you've been playing like beforehand. So if you've been kind of defaulting a lot and taking things super slow, waiting until like a minute-ish to group up and hit something, so you're actually on site by like, I don't know, 45, 30 seconds, I think that a fast exit can work just to catch them off guard and catch them and make them not notice patterns in your game that would give you away and make them like go for picks in certain places because they know you tend to gravitate towards those areas. Now, another type of execute that I kind of, it's a bit weird to explain, but in my mind, I call it the full execute. This is kind of more of the executes that I see from teams that are more tactical. So if you think of like an MSL and North team where they just kind of all line up, this is very similar to like a just quick execute, but you're taking more time. You're working this control. Generally, the rounds that you would call this on are a little bit slower. You normally call these early on the round, so a good example of this would be the Mirage A site, which I'm going to switch to now. Okay, so now that we're on this A site, full execute, so I can explain it better, it's kind of a lot more predetermined than a lot of these fast executes, just because you have a lot more time to think and talk things through and what's going to happen. So, for example, on a fast execute on A, you might just throw the CT smoke or the jungle smoke and just throw a bunch of flashes over and just kind of duel out. With a full execute, I feel like these are a lot more structured. So obviously, the smokes are going to be pre-planned. So you're going to throw like maybe a jungle smoke, a stair smoke, a CT smoke, stuff like that. So you're going to see these smokes, and then I'm just going to kind of underhand the CT smoke because you guys are going to get the point. But then, like, this is pretty common, but also there's going to be a molly here and a molly like for the bench run out, and maybe one even like here if you can get it. And then even if you get more detailed, you can also throw like a flash off this or like a specific pop flash instead of just throwing them over, just to get specific spots blind. And then you're going to come out and you're already going to know what you're going to be dueling. The difference, this is one of the biggest difference that I've noticed with fast execs, is that generally players can tend to be in more locations when you're doing fast executes, just because they're still setting up in the round. But with these more planned executes, they're more common places that players are going to be. So if I'm doing a normal execute like I just mentioned, there's a chance that there's going to be a guy around this area of the map just because he got mollied off from under balcony, or he could be up top. The likelihood of one player being sandwiched is not that likely. There could be one back triple trying to transition in a CT, maybe one coming through the smoke, but it's already mollied. So these types of executes are more based on 100% optimizing the fight, so you are just kind of going against a limited number of unknowns. So, for example, you're already going to know that this guy is probably here and probably here, so you're not going to really worry about checking stairs or checking here or on top of balcony. He's already going to be mollied off. So stuff like that is a full execute. So what I mean by these are called more early in the round is that these kind of take a little bit more time to set up. So you're going to start setting these up from earlier on in the round. Obviously, I wouldn't like there's different variations to it. So you could maybe even have a player go top mid and maybe like throw some utility window or smoke cat to stop a rotation. You can change it up a lot, but these are definitely a lot more pre-planned and definitely practice and less loose than a lot of other strats. But this is just an example, so again, you guys can kind of understand the gist of what I'm trying to say. You're taking more time to pre-plan stuff. Also, another big point of these is that you're developing routing so that your team knows what everyone is doing within the round. So with a fast execute, everyone can be kind of going in the same area, but a lot of optimization is wasted there. So everyone will probably be looking at this headshot angle while they're walking out. With a full exec, you're probably all looking at different things because it's a little more pre-planned. So your entry combo, let's say if you had two players coming on a site, they're going to worry about these two guys close. So they're going to focus this fight here. This first guy's going to swing, and his route is going to be probably running up to site like this, or crossing in from default to fight this guy, and he's not worrying about anything else. Meanwhile, your third player who's running out, he's the one worrying about the bench run out, or like this guy here and here, and then your opera is also just worrying about that, and then you potentially have one more player lurking or something. But if it were more of a fast exec, everyone's kind of looking everywhere. So sometimes you'll see like in FPL games or whatever it may be, you'll see players kind of like doing this thing where they like clear everything super quickly and they're like kind of jiggling and stutter stepping everything. That's just because there's no real uniformity to what they're doing. There's no real macro level management. Now, the last style that I kind of call a style or like way of calling is a pick-based call, and you see this out of most teams that have one super talented player. So normally back in 2015, 2016, you would have Kenny S on, I believe, Titan and Envious in those days. Or nowadays, I think a good team like that has this kind of playstyle would be either Vitality or the more underrated one, NRG. Obviously, they're not super underrated because they're a top 5 team IMO, but that's besides the point. So these pick-based strategies kind of revolve around getting set up. they're similar in a way that they still grant you map control, but your focus is getting a pick and then trying to work something off of that. So for example, normally what I would do is if I'm going for a pick based round is I would have my opera come towards mid, maybe with a flash, maybe with a smoke catwalk, and he's focusing on working a pick from one area of the map. So if he gets this window pick, that's great. Maybe we can smoke window or like smoke connector and split towards B because their mid defenders are weak, you know? Or maybe, you know, if he goes for the connector peek here, he gets this pick, he's running back, or he's holding mid for the rotation while we're all executing out A. The goal of these pick-based ones is to give yourself an early advantage, and it gives you a lot more variability in the round. If you want to do something with it, you can do like a fast exec, and just like if you get that kill, you're gonna run out, you're gonna execute A site or B site. You can do whatever you want with the smokes, yada yada yada, or you can just kind of let it like just kind of sit in their stomachs for a bit and let the team that you're going against pretty much decide what they want to do because you got that pick. Now they could decide to rotate one over, and then if you want to go back to like a more default, just hold position, see how they react. That could also work because sometimes it'll result in one player trying to go for a play and it won't work out. Like I know a lot of times if you kill a player towards like B or like towards middle or towards cat, a player will generally tend to play this ankle either more aggressively or he'll be in a more common spot. So if this guy gets killed on cat, he doesn't really have much of an option. He either has to go back to like market or either push up and try to get control of something. So a lot of times I'll see a player over here because I hold apps on the default. He'll try to swing and fight me, and I'll just kill him, and then that means we have B side open. So you can take advantage of it in multiple different ways. I think that this is one of the stronger default methods to have, but it's also highly dependent on who you have as your player and what kind of fights they need to take. For example, I wouldn't make an AK, like a AK or a rifler, take this fight, right? I don't want them like swing out mid like this, fighting an op, trying to get the pick. I would much rather have them like go for a pick that's kind of based from ramp or even from like B apps and try to kill a guy who's jumping up here, because generally a lot of players jump up and you can just hit that shot and run out and execute off of it. So that's kind of the next thing that I wanted to get into. So this section is kind of meant for the IGLs who don't really know what the reasoning behind calling a certain strat in the round would be. So obviously the main thing that I want you guys to take away from this section of the video is that it's highly dependent on what kind of players you have on your team. If you have a team that's more that works better in slower, like set pre-planned stuff where you have to micromanage a lot of players, a slower playstyle would work for you a lot better. So for example, if you have a team kind of like Gobby's teams, or like a team that's more structured, like I think Gobby's a good one. Obviously if I cut back in a second I could probably think of another one. A lot of the flip side teams that had Bondic and their IGL, I think Blade was him. Yeah, Blade. Zeus isn't as common now for him to do these super like late defaults into full executes, but it's been a bit of a meme in the CSGO community. So I think older Zeus playstyles are also that kind of method as well. But generally for the lower tier teams, a lot of people do still use this kind of loose style that Liquid plays very similarly to. Obviously they have a little more advanced techniques in their stuff where they have a lot of things pre-planned, but they play a little more loose. A lot of their players are more out there, like taking these risks that are calculated obviously, but nonetheless risk, where they can still die, but the odds are that they do win nowadays, and that kind of opens up a lot of avenues for them to exec off of or do whatever they want really, because that's the main thing with the way that Liquid plays. They play loose to be able to get certain picks, to be able to walk out together on a site, or just kind of take advantage of certain weak spots and responses from the enemy team. So I just kind of went through the macro managing level, but Liquid obviously being one of the looser teams that plays like that. Another team that plays super loose, because I like giving you guys example, teams like Furia, although they're not the best at the moment, they haven't really been doing too well after the couple events. They're still very good in the terms that they're like kind of loose early. They kind of, especially on Nuke, I've noticed that they like taking advantage of breaking the door and going down the ladder early and doing stuff like that just to work picks and make the other team kind of feel uncomfortable. That's another huge thing. So what I want you guys to understand is that you obviously want to optimize your strategies for what's best for your team. You know, a lot of times I see people worry about what the other team's gonna do, but to a certain extent it doesn't really matter, because you should really be focused on developing your team the way that you want them to play, because that's gonna lead them to being a lot more comfortable. If you're constantly trying to counter the other team, that's not gonna leave your team too comfortable. So you kind of are walking a fine line between, you know, countering the other team and knowing their tendencies, and also not making your team play just to those specifically if it doesn't line up with what they are most used to and most comfortable and, the best suited for. So I just want you guys to be aware of that, and thank you guys for watching, and see you guys in the next one. Thanks.